Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. Sorry, had a rough day yesterday. We're back on track today. Let's get into the show. We want to get into it right away. We've got a few minutes of Melanie Joly testifying in committee to show before we drop into the House of Commons. Welcome everybody. Aaron, let's get it going. Smash the like, hit subscribe, get notified for these live shows. We've got a good one coming up today. Let's kick this off. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Oh, yeah.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. Because our fruit is truer than
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
This area shares a border with Canada. It has a very high concentration of people, of capital, of institutions, and other like-minded partners that are critical to Canada's interests, both at home and abroad. Here, we can exert influence. Canadians expect us to be at the table. The Consulate General in New York is not only Canada's oldest consulate, it is one of our most important missions in the world. We're talking about access to a market worth more than $6 trillion, $200 billion in annual two-way trade in this region alone, connecting Canadian exporters with international markets and providing essential market intelligence. The consulate also directly supports Canadians, particularly during crisis. You may recall a tour bus crash in upstate New York or the incident at the Rainbow Bridge last November. We need a Canadian presence on the ground to liaise with US authorities and relay accurate information. We cannot rely on Fox News like PIERRE does and end up calling the Rainbow Bridge incident a terrorist attack. Nous avons 182.
We have 182 missions in over 112 countries around the world, and real estate management is handled by a team of qualified public servants. They have clear instructions to make sure that all rules are followed and that Canadian taxpayers have the most for their money. That's what I expect from them. As the committee heard, global affairs civil servants have followed all the necessary rules in renting this real estate in New York. We wanted to have the best price-quality ratio for Canadians, and I expected that. But we have also heard over several meetings you had on this subject. It was an operational decision. It wasn't a political decision.
Sure. I just want to say that I find it ironic that On the day of this historic and pivotal election in the United States, the opposition continues to argue that we should be reducing our presence in the United States. To be clear, I disagree. American voters will make a choice today, and our government will respect that choice and work closely with the new administration. I, for one, firmly believe that one of the most important ways to show respect for your neighbor, to engage with them, and build a relationship is face-to-face. I will now take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please.
New documents reported in Politico today reveal that Tom Clark lied during his appearance before this committee. We know that he personally complained that his taxpayer-funded residence wasn't up to his standards because it didn't have a luxury kitchen or the perfect floor plan. And after Tom Clark complained, Justin Trudeau rewarded his friend and media pal with a new luxury condo at 4 times the cost to taxpayers. So to Canadians who are watching, Justin Trudeau and Tom Clark fleeced the taxpayers, and they tried to cover it up. So, Minister, do you think it's appropriate for Justin Trudeau to have awarded his media pal, Tom Clark, with such a flagrant waste of tax dollars, especially during this cost of living crisis that we're facing?
So, before you interrupt me, because I know, Michael, that's a strategy you use, I really think that there are 3 things. First, I think that, you know, Canadians are getting good value for money because there will be $7 million in Canadian taxpayers' savings. Second, you know, the process was respected at all times. And thirdly, I profoundly believe that more than ever, as we're going through, the American people are going through an important election today, we need to invest in our presence in the U.S. So I really hope, Michael, that you agree with me, because I know your riding is next to the U.S. and you have 2 bridges that permit fantastic workers going through it, truck drivers exporting and importing millions of dollars
That was sufficient
every
time
day
for you to not answer the
between
question,
Canada
Minister.
and U.S. So I've answered your question.
Is it common for your department to spend nearly $10 million on luxury condos without you personally approving?
So first and foremost, to answer your question, this was not a political decision because it was an operational decision. And you had numerous people, officials of mine, that came to see you and said that. So these are the facts, and I really hope that you can...
When did you approve the $9 million
this is again
luxury
the strategy that Michael
for
uses, which
Consul
is to
General
interrupt
Tom
me.
Clark?
Michael, can you just stop? I'll just finish.
So,
I promise it won't be long. I just want to finish my sentence.
Point of order, Chair.
Yep. Mr. Barrett?
Okay. So, in spite of the minister's hostile response to my first question, she was afforded equal time to the amount of time that I posed the question, even though she didn't answer it. I asked a second question, and she was afforded equal amount of time to the length of the question, and she was able to do with that what she wished. Now, if the minister wants to interrupt me, that of course is not in order at this committee. So, Chair, could you please provide clarification to the minister that she will be afforded the same amount of time to respond as the amount of time that I posed the question?
It has been the practice at this committee that it is the member's time. So if you wish to take 5 minutes for a question and provide 30 seconds for a response, that is your decision, Mr. Barrett, but it is the committee member's time. Go ahead, sir.
First learn about the $9 million New York City condo on Billionaires Row for Justin Trudeau's media buddy, Tom Clark. What was the date?
So first and foremost, I must say that this was not a political decision, so I learned it through the media. And at the same time, I made sure that all rules was respected, and that's the case in this case.
We didn't get a date from the minister. The story broke on July the 12th, and I have an email from your former chief of staff dated on June 17th that says, thanks for the briefing note of the issue. The decision to sell and purchase a new residence seems like the logical step to take in this instance. Did you meet with your chief of staff between June 17th and July 12th?
So I must say that, of course, the department informed my chief of staff once the decision was taken, because of course it was not a political decision.
Chief.
So many times per day, Michael. And you know what?
So
it's good news because there's so many things happening.
This is flagrant malpractice.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking.
Yeah, and your time is up. This is flagrant malpractice for you as a minister to just completely ignore.
Kelly, I'm sorry.
I'm going to interrupt.
I understand you're in the same party, both. But at the same time,
I'm going to interrupt everyone here. I have the floor. A couple things. It is the tradition in this committee. We use our last names out of kind of a sign of respect, but it is the members' time. I would ask, you'll have, I'm sure, an opportunity to perhaps get some of your points across to other questions, but it is the members' time. We ask that you allow Mr. Barrett to speak and provide answers. You have, we're at 3:44, so you have 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Mr. Barrett.
So, Minister, in the June 17th memo to your Chief of Staff, it says Tom Clark approved the $9 million condo and it was instrumental in the purchase. With hindsight, do you wish that your Chief of Staff had got your personal sign-off on this if you claim that you did not, in fact, know about it?
So, Michael, no. Why? Because you've already answered. You have already asked me the question, and I've already answered. So this was a decision that, according to Treasury Board rules, had to go through the department, and therefore no
These
political
are Treasury Board
involvement.
rules that your government changed. Of course, you raised the limit just in time to, of course, buy this luxury condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy Tom
I'm sorry,
Clark.
but that's false.
Now,
that was done in 2019.
Now, right, your cabinet made the change, Minister. So you're the one who made the change just in time to be able to make this purchase so that you could say you didn't hear anything and you didn't say anything.
That's
How
false
many
also.
heads of mission have been, quote, instrumental in purchasing luxury condos?
So this is a decision that is always taken by the department. And so I know that you've been doing character assassination against Tom Clark, and that's really sad because when you don't have your facts straight, usually what you do, you resort to personal attacks.
Sad, Minister, is that Canadians are struggling just to get by, lined up at food banks in record numbers, and you seem to have checked out on any accountability that you should be exercising in your role as minister. And we see that instead of helping Canadians, you're helping well-connected liberal insiders. So I think I have just about a minute left. And I have to know, because the claim from your officials was that this was going to be a great deal. Canadians were going to save all kinds of money and that they had sold the previous condo. We heard that this was the case. So if you could tell Canadians now, how much was the check that the Receiver General received for the sale of the former residence that justified the purchase of this $9 million condo? How much did you sell the previous residence for?
So we are convinced that we'll make sure that we have $7 million back for Canadian taxpayers, because I think it is a good value for money transaction. It is a transaction that is actually well supported.
Is that the check
and I'm sorry, I'm still speaking.
You haven't received a check.
So, and you've spoken for a long time. It's not a question, it's actually a rant.
I'm afraid we are out of time.
Both Canadians are out of pocket millions.
Mr. Kuzmierczak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Minister, for being here today. Welcome to the mighty OGO Committee. This transaction saves Canadian taxpayers $7.4 million. I want to repeat that. This transaction saves Canadians
condo.
In our consulates or embassies and high commission. So usually what is being done, of course, is that branch of the department is in charge of the real estate. They take the decisions. You've seen through this entire process, you've heard so many, more than 20 different options were looked at. There was
and I appreciate that, but if we could just come back to that,
yeah,
because,
I'm getting that.
Because what I want to know is it specific for each consular general that they're included, or is it a more general approach where you sort of get an understanding of what is needed on a broad scope,
of course,
and then apply it? Because there's a lot of insinuation here that there was specific connection, and I think that's concerning for Canadians.
Yes, and Rachel, I was getting to that, and so basically.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Mr. Brock, please, for 5.
Minister, notwithstanding your opening comments about the importance of Canada's relationship to the United States, your appearance today is exclusively about the egregious abuse of taxpayer money. Emily Richardson, the Chief of Staff of your Associate Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, the author of the infamous memo, was given information that Tom Clark was instrumental throughout the process and gave the green light for the purchase of the Billionaires Row condo. She testified that she simply inserts information as provided to her. Minister, you acknowledge that she wrote the original memo circulated on June 17th to your former chief that states Clark was instrumental, correct?
Donc, je vais juste répondre à votre question, Larry.
Just to answer your question, Larry. My chief of staff was informed once that his decision was made, and that's what was stated here. That's the information I have. These are the facts.
Day after this committee passed a motion ordering all documents from your department related to the purchase of the condo, the same Emily Richardson, who says she simply inputs information provided to her, all of a sudden issued a major correction saying it was a mistake that Clark was instrumental and gave the green light. Minister, do you find that suspicious in any way?
Non, absolument pas. Parce que bien entendu.
No, absolutely not. Because as I answered our colleague Rachel Blaney earlier, there's always some information provided to different ambassadors and consuls, but they don't have any decision-making power.
Suspicious, as do the millions of Canadians who are watching this on a live feed. And now it's been confirmed that your staff, the ministry officials who've appeared here, and even Tom Clark himself, the buddy, the good friend of Justin Trudeau himself, was instrumental in starting the process of relocating Tom Clark to Billionaires Row condominium in Manhattan. It was simply unsuitable for him. It was important for him to have the full suite of Gaggenau appliances. It was important for him to have the $5,000 coffee machine. It was important for him to have the golf simulator, and your office provided that to him. Isn't that correct?
Non, c'est faux, Larry.
No, that's not true, Larry. You know what Canadians are looking at today? There are millions of people looking at us. I think that's somewhat exaggerated. I think there are millions of Canadians that have their eyes focused on what's happening in the U.S., the results of today's elections, and what Canadians expect is that we should be well represented, that we invest in our relationship with the United States.
The memo created by Emily Richardson was sent to your office, to your chief of staff. Your office gets involved, and the story around Tom Clark mysteriously and suddenly changes. Did you personally, Minister, become involved in the process to cover up for Justin Trudeau's close friend, Tom Clark? Yes or no?
Absolument pas. Puis je
Absolutely not. I would like to know, every time you mention Mr. Trudeau, do you have...
Trudeau, did your chief of staff assist Justin Trudeau in covering up for Tom Clark? Yes or no?
J'ai déjà répondu.
I think I've already answered that question. Every time you mention Justin Trudeau, I will also mention Pierre Poilievre, because one thing is for sure.
Again, were you ever briefed on the condo purchase from June 17th when your top official, your chief of staff, became aware a government document identified Clark as being instrumental and gave the green light?
Est-ce que Pierre Poilievre vous a demandé?
What Pierre Poilievre, he asked us the same question 3 times. Maybe I'll give 3 different answers.
What else is your chief of staff keeping from you, and by extension, you, Minister, keeping from Canadians?
Je pense que les Canadiens.
I think Canadians expect us to invest in the relationship, that we have value for our money, and that all the processes are followed.
En accord avec cette approche.
So we agree with that.
Clark is paying $1,800 per month in rent. That's less than the national average for Canadians. Do you think that's fair, that that's what he has to pay in rent for a $9 million luxury condo when your government is responsible for doubling rent, doubling mortgage costs, requiring Canadians to have to save 25 years just for a down payment? That's your government's legacy, and you're giving this guy a $9 million condo for $1,800 a month. Do you think it's fair Yes or no?
How much is POILIEVRE paying for staying in his government-funded
Minister,
house
I have great
right
news
now?
for you. You're going to have lots of
but
time to
Michael,
ask us questions when you're on the opposition side of the House. But today, you're supposed to be a minister that's responsible for your department, and you're demonstrating a failure in that.
Yeah, that is our time. We will go to Ms. Atwin, and perhaps she can continue the line of questioning. Go ahead, Ms. Atwin, please, for 5. Both sides, Mr. Kazmierczuk, Mr. Barrett.
You got your clip?
It's Miss. I'm sorry, colleagues.
Point of order.
I'm sorry. It's Miss Atwin's time, both of you. Miss Blaney.
I just wanted to remind people that the interpreters do have a hard time hearing when people are speaking like that. So it's not only to listen to the chair, as we all should. It's to also respect the people who work for us.
Is Miss Atwin's floor. Thank you, Miss Blaney. Go ahead for 5, Miss Atwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister, for being with us and for your officials to join us again today. And I would just open by, sending a message to my friends and family in the United States. It is a particularly important day. We've all been kind of anxiously awaiting today, even though I know we may not have results as early as we'd like, but just wishing everyone well, and I hope that everyone got out and vote and exercise that critical right that we have to participate in democracy. I also like to just
Sorry, gang. I don't want to listen to too many liberals. I find them upsetting. They're fine for my regular videos live. I'll do them in question period. I'm not covering them here. So we're going to zip to the next conservative.
Mr. Chair, the crux of the motion is that this new information, as determined by Politico from this information that Politico obtained, shows a direct contradiction between Mr. Clark's testimony to this committee and information that he communicated to the department. I will quote the article. It says that he notified Global Affairs that the official residence was not suitable, these are his words, not suitable for hosting or for living, and required immediate replacement, also his words, required immediate replacement, document show. If I were to go home to my husband this weekend and say, honey, our home is not suitable for our family, and it requires immediate replacement, I could only expect and understand that my husband would take it as a signal that we need a communication that we need a new home. There can be no other interpretation of these words that Mr. Clark communicated to Global Affairs Canada. In saying something is not suitable, in saying that it requires immediate replacement, this indicates Mr. Clark felt the necessity of a new location, and not only that, a better one, as indicated by the words "not suitable." He expressed concerns regarding the completion of the kitchen and refurbishment project and indicated the unit was not suitable to be the accommodations and does not have an ideal floor plan for representational activities. These things all indicate to him, first of all, inputting into the process, and secondly, asking for immediate action, and 3, wanting some type of improvement. I believe that that's not what not suitable indicates. Now, if he would like to come here and argue that there were other more reasonable requirements, such as not being accessible, his aspirations relative to his mandate with large monthly gatherings, his desire to make Canada shine, he can come here and he can argue that. He can do that if he likes. But it is just evident from the article, from the information as obtained by Politico, that he communicated that he made input into this decision, which is contrary to what he shared with this committee. And any time that we have found a contradiction of testimony, and unfortunately with this government we have found contradiction of testimony several times over in several situations, and I won't repeat them or belabor them once again, but this is not the first time. But it is the practice when we have found contradicting testimony with new information that we call a witness back to this committee to not only give them the opportunity to correct the record, because this is the fair and right thing to do, but also to justify their actions and their words to Canadians, whether something was misinterpreted, whether something was the new information was in a different context. We have always provided this space and this opportunity when there have been contradictions for witnesses to come back. And so I believe that given this new information from Politico today, given the clear contradiction between the testimony of Mr. Clark and what we have found out today, it behooves us as a committee, not only for the purpose of finding out why this contradiction exists, but also for the transparency of information to and for Canadians to invite Mr. Clark back. So I believe in supporting this motion, we are supporting transparency. We are recognizing that a contradiction exists and giving Mr. Clark the opportunity to come back and provide an exclamation, and provide transparency for Canadians as to why $9 million of their hard-earned money was spent when there is a record $2 million Canadians lining up at food banks, a 28% increase in my own city of Calgary. And I think that these are all justifiable reasons to support this motion and to call Mr. Clark back, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go to Mr. Brock, then Mr. Sousa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that I remember vividly from Mr. Clark's previous testimony at the mighty Ogo was just how adamant, to the point of literally raising his voice, turning red in color in face, how adamant he was that from start to finish he had no influence whatsoever in the acquisition of the condominium on Billionaires Row. Now, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Ms. Kuzi and Mr. Barrett. I believe Ms. Block was also in attendance, and myself. All four of us didn't believe one word that he was saying. This was well before we received any evidence from Politico, and all of us accused him of lying, of which he took great offense to. But here we are, some several months removed, and the political instincts of the Conservative members here in Ogo were validated.
Hey gang, smash the like. As soon as Larry wraps up here, we'll cross over to question period, but we did want to show a little bit of these clips.
100% validated that notwithstanding that this condominium, the old condominium on Park Avenue, was quite suitable for over 20 council generals, 2 months within the mandate of Tom Clark, which just happens to coincide with records that this committee has received, happens to coincide with a cozy meeting that Tom Clark had with Justin Trudeau in Manhattan, where both of them were boasting and smiling and laughing in the back of a limousine, driving down one of the major thoroughfares of Manhattan. Within 2 months, we learn that Tom Clark now is a confirmed liar. That he has, I know, Mr. Sousa, you find that rather remarkable for me now saying that, but it's interesting that when this story broke, which I believe was yesterday from Politico, there was such an eerie silence from the Liberal government. Nothing by way of any sort of clarifying statement from the PMO, no clarifying statement from Justin Trudeau, nothing from Tom Clark, but just eerie silence, as if it was a child getting caught with his hand in the cookie jar. That's what I equate this to. Because now we know within 2 months of Tom Clark's arrival in New York, he notifies Global Affairs, and we don't know how that notification took place, whether it was a phone call, whether it was an email, whether it was relayed via Justin Trudeau, who knows? We'll eventually find all of that out, but it certainly requires a deeper examination. That it was not suitable, his words, not suitable for hosting or for living, and required immediate replacement. Immediate. Because obviously a multi-decade-old condominium didn't suit the particular lavish lifestyle of Tom Clark. And to feed that hubris element of Tom Clark, whose ego is as large as all the oceans combined. Thank you for that, Mr. Sousa. I'll take that as a compliment. Wanted to have,
Mr. Brock
wanted
has
to
the
live
floor,
like
please.
a king. Wanted to live like a king. And interestingly, how this story broke to Canadians is through the American media, because American media caught up with the acquisition, this purchase on Billionaires Row, and it was listed in the name of His Majesty the King. That sparked interest. That sparked curiosity. And it was only then that Global Affairs confirmed, no, it's not King Charles who is looking for an alternate residence or a secondary or tertiary residence. No, it's for the Consul General. So then the story started to break, and then we started to learn about all these impressive amenities. The Venetian marble, the full suite of the Gaggenau appliances. I did some research on Gaggenau. Gaggenau is the most expensive appliance manufacturer in the world. Kings, I'm sure, have Gaggenau appliances. Shaws and Sheiks have Gaggenau appliances. The coffee maker alone, Mr. Chair, $5,000. And if memory serves me correct, the refrigerator alone, $19,000. 3 bedrooms, because it's important that Tom Clark and his wife have access to extra bedrooms. You never know when Justin wants to come down to Manhattan, and perhaps they can give him an extra room to sleep in. But in addition to that, we have all the other amenities available to occupants of Billionaires Row. We got the golf simulator. We got the full-length.
So, gang, sorry, but question period is starting. I'm doing videos on these this evening. That's probably why I'm not. Again, people don't realize how much work goes into one of these shows. It's as simple as that. I don't think I'm going to be doing that tonight. Anyway. We'll get into question period here.
Of the Bloc Québécois Libre. Just recently, the Bloc leader voted twice, affirming his confidence in the Liberal Prime Minister. And for a month, the Bloc leader made people believe he was going to make gains for Quebec, but the result, nothing. That is what the Bloc leader's concrete record is. For Quebec, no gains, but 2 votes for Justin. So we can't wait for an election to elect a good government, a conservative government.
C'est rare que la...
It is rare that the Speaker has to intervene twice, but the honourable member, and reminder for all members, knows that we cannot refer to another elected official by their first name or family name.
Honourable member from Don Valley West.
Mr. Speaker, foreign interference is a danger to our country, and we all have to do everything in our power to call it out and to address it. Our government has made it a top priority. Canadians are nervous. The RCMP has evidence that agents of the Government of India are involved in serious criminal activities undermining our democracy. There are reports of a number of other countries intimidating citizens, interfering in elections, and leadership campaigns. The leader of the official opposition needs to do his part.
That's right.
He needs to show we're united in this fight.
That's right.
Every member of this House took an oath. Some of us have leadership responsibilities and take other measures, including getting the appropriate security clearances so we can do our part keeping Canada and Canadians safe. The leader of the official opposition can't delay any longer. He has to apply for the top security clearance so he can do his part and let Canadians stop wondering about what he may be hiding.
What's he hiding?
Order. The honourable member from North Island, Powell River.
At Remembrance during Veterans Week, recognizing both Aboriginal Veterans Day and Remembrance Day, I want to thank every person who has served or is serving our country, and thank their loved ones as well, who we all know serve alongside them. Every year I am so grateful to the many legions who are in my riding that prepare sacred events around remembering the service of Canadian soldiers. I have 11 across my riding, and I want to name them all, Mr. Speaker. Port Hardy Legion Branch 237, Port McNeil Legion Branch 281, Port Alice Legion number 180, Gold River Legion 270, Sayward Legion number 147, Campbell River Legion number 137, Quadra Island 154, Alert Bay Legion 198, Comox Legion Branch 160, Powell River Legion number 164, and Texada Island 232. With significant engagement from their communities, they hold space for veterans, and it's so important that we remember them lest we forget.
The honourable member for Bellay-Chambly. During the first seconds of the record gala on Sunday, we were really under the spell of what took place. They passed the torch of Quebec songwriting and paid respect to Leonard Cohen. On behalf of the Bloc, I would like to congratulate them for their album, Inuktitut, and they won the Felix Award for the Album of the Year. And with their other artists, they build bridges between the various worlds that only an artist can understand. The Quebec nation on Sunday expressed its full affection. Bravo and thank you.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, the Canadian dream of home ownership has become a pipe dream, unless, of course, you're a friend of the Prime Minister. Today it was revealed that he purchased a $9 million condo on Billionaires Row in New York City for his good friend Tom Clark, after Clark complained that his old residence wasn't up to his standards. It's difficult to do the work of a consul general without Italian marble floors, a $5,000 coffee machine, and a golf simulator at your disposal. This revelation confirms that Tom Clark lied to committee about his involvement in the purchase. It also confirms evidence obtained by committee showing that Clark was instrumental when it came to purchasing the property. Canadians are fed up with this government. It's time for change, time for accountability, time for a Conservative government who will bring transparency and respect back to the Canadian taxpayer.
The honourable member from Kitchener South. Order. The honourable member from Kitchener South, Hesper.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, is seeking to create a safer online space for all Canadians in this increasingly digital age. Online harms have real-world impacts with tragic, even fatal consequences, and the delays in our Parliament are putting more Canadians at risk every day. I think of the important work of Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda Todd, the 15-year-old girl who so tragically took her life 12 years ago after being victimized online. Carol stated in an interview that the filibuster that is happening right now and holding everything up is so frustrating. It's just wasting time. I've waited 12 years for this. Unfortunately, the important work this House undertakes has been held up due to Conservative delay tactics with support from opposition parties. We are working every day to pass important legislation for Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and the Conservatives are working every day to make sure this isn't the case.
Questions orales. All questions.
Let's get it going.
Leader of the Opposition.
Here looks like he's in a good mood.
Just 80 days after becoming Prime Minister, Stephen Harper promised to put an end to, or managed to put an end to, tariffs on softwood lumber. But this Prime Minister caved in and allowed Donald Trump to reimpose those tariffs, and Mr. Biden doubled them. Stephen Harper entered into a deal with Barack Obama in order to avoid the consequences of the Buy America Act. Can we have an election so that Canadians could have a Prime Minister who will stand up for Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, what we see once again is the Conservative leader saying anything and everything. While we stand up against Donald Trump, we stood up against him when he wanted to renegotiate NAFTA, and it was the Conservatives, including Stephen Harper, who were encouraging us to back down and not offend the Americans. On the contrary, we stood up for ourselves. We protected supply management. We protected steel and aluminum workers. We protected Canadian jobs all across this country, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. This Liberal Prime Minister not only capitulated to Obama, Trump, and Biden, he also gave $500 million worth of investment that left this country, impoverishing Canadians in the process. 10 years ago, the New York Times said life in Canada has the wealthiest middle class in the world. And Canada seems to be outstripping even the U.S. Today, it's the opposite. Canadians are poorer than Americans. Why is this Prime Minister creating jobs for Americans? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition leader continues to claim that Canada's broken, but at the same time, he wants to get rid of the investments that will help Canadians, for example, with the construction of new homes. The millions of dollars that we've sent to the government of Cpac to build new affordable housing, if it was up to him, he would cut and impose austerity on Quebecers and all Canadians. They don't want that. We don't want that. We need to invest to help alleviate the housing crisis, and that not the kind of policies the opposition leader is proposing.
Minister Stephen Harper only 80 days to get a softwood lumber deal that put an end to the tariffs and reimbursed what we're already collected. And then this Liberal Prime Minister capitulated, allowed Trump to reimpose the tariffs and Biden to double them. Harper got us an exemption to Buy America This Prime Minister then capitulated, allowed Trump and Biden to reimpose them, hurting our construction workers and our providers of steel. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so that we can have a Prime Minister that no longer capitulates to the Americans, but instead will stand up for Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since I just answered that question in French, allow me instead to take a moment to condemn unequivocally the violence we've seen in South Asian communities across the country over the past few nights. Let me be very, very clear. The individuals who are inciting violence and division and hatred in no way represent either the Sikh community or the Hindu community in Canada. At a time of Diwali, Bandi Chor Divas, we're seeing communities come together to celebrate their diversity and their strength. We will continue to stand for the unity of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The New York Times 10 years ago. Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class. Median income in Canada appears to have surpassed median income in the United States. Oh, what a decade can do. Now, American workers make almost $20,000 more than their Canadian counterparts. They get twice as much investment every single year. The gap between our per capita GDP and that of the United States is now the worst in a century after this Prime Minister's rising taxes, bureaucracy, and blocking of energy projects. I know why Harris and Trump want to create jobs for Americans, but why does this Prime Minister want to help them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the silence of the Conservative leader is deafening when it comes to what's happening in the South Asian communities right now. And it's a real shame. Not only is he not stepping forward to talk about how all Canadians must stand together and all South Asian Canadians, Sikh, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, are celebrating together this weekend, but he even refuses to take the issue seriously enough to get the security clearance necessary to be briefed on threats to Canada and to Canadians. That's not leadership, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Now you know his real agenda. He wants to distract from all the economic misery he's called at home. And so he uses divisions here at home. These divisions are the result of him. Under his leadership, we've seen a 251% increase in hate crimes, fire bombings of synagogues, bullets shot at Jewish children's schools, 100 churches burned and vandalized, and now we see sectarian riots on the streets of Brampton. This never happened before this Prime Minister. Does he take ownership for the divisions he's caused and the violence that has resulted?
Order. Colleagues, I'm going to ask members, please, especially members from the far end of the House, to please not take the floor unless they are recognized by the Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, people watching that last answer will know and note the assuredness with which the Leader of the Opposition declared all the causes and the sources of the terrible violence we're seeing, when the reality is he refuses to take the necessary briefings that our security agencies are offering him to understand the threats to Canada. Why won't he get the security?
Thank you very much, Cicely Bardol. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. You're amazing.
Clearance necessary to protect Canadians.
Order. Colleagues, it does not do well when on one side of the House is asked to keep quiet The other sides of the House should do the same. All members should do the same. L'honorable.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the government has tabled regulations to cap greenhouse gas emissions. It's a bit complacent because the deadlines are long, extremely long, and it's Quebecers and Canadians who are paying the price. This is going to give polluters a holiday on emissions control, and this regulation is may appear inadequate given the oil and gas lobby here in the House. Could this not be better done through statute? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have always chosen to do everything that's necessary to reduce emissions, to protect Canadian prosperity, and to protect Canadians' future. That's why we're moving ahead with a cap on greenhouse gas emissions coming from the oil industry. This is an industry that is making record profits, an industry that already has the technology to reduce emissions, but with this cap, the industry will have to invest to reduce emissions so that everyone does their fair share in reducing emissions and protecting the planet. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Instead of considering the green equalization or green banking or funding of green technology, as the Bloc has been advocating for a long time, the Prime Minister himself has said that this is an industry whose profits have skyrocketed since the pandemic. Instead of imposing standards that aren't tough enough, why doesn't he impose tougher standards? And that way he could go before the electorate finally with a bold record on the environment. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I know full well that both the Bloc and we have the same opinion on this. No industry should be allowed to pollute without limit. That's why we have put a cap on greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas industry. That industry contributes almost 1/3 of Canada's annual emissions, and so that industry has a greater capacity to reduce our emissions. They're making record profits, so we agree that they should reinvest in technologies that will help reduce emissions and help them do their fair share.
Honourable member from Burnaby South.
Who here doesn't have a family doctor? Well, 5 million Canadians don't. Now, Loblaws owns Maple, and a family doctor working at Maple's will charge you $80 a month per person to see a doctor. Now, things are gotten so bad, this is predatory. The Prime Minister lets you down, and then Galen Weston swoops in to profit off it. Why is this Prime Minister letting Galen Weston profit off of people's pain?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that it is the provincial area of jurisdiction to deliver health care in this country, but it is the federal responsibility to make sure that that health care remains public and universal and single payer. And that is exactly what we're doing by investing a record $200 billion in health care over the coming years that will oblige the provinces to invest in public health care, to hire more doctors, particularly family doctors, to reduce wait times and to improve their mental health services. These are things that Canadians expect, including the federal government expecting it of the provinces.
L'honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
The honourable member for Burnaby South. Private health care is a jungle. It could cost $213 for a minor emergency. It's so profitable that real estate investors are opening private clinics. And the Prime Minister will the Prime Minister finally stand up and put an end to all of this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, unlike the NDP, we understand and respect the fact that the delivery of health care comes under provincial jurisdiction, but the federal government is responsible for ensuring that our healthcare system remains public, and the federal government has to be there to help with the funding. That's why we've put on the table $200 billion in investments for the next 10 years, which will allow for the hiring of more family doctors, reducing wait times, more support for mental health and workers in the system. And that's what all Canadians expect.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
This Liberal NDP Prime Minister presides over the worst GDP per person growth since the Great Depression. And it's no surprise. His high taxes and woke policies like carbon tax scams, job-killing capital gains tax hike, and oil and gas cap have made Canadians poorer. In fact, U.S. GDP grew 2.8% as Canadians' GDP per person declined for 2 years, driving out business, investment, and jobs. Will this Prime Minister axe the tax hikes that make Canadians poorer?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative will talk about is the record level of investment we have seen in the country, Mr. Speaker. But more importantly for Canadians watching at home, people are wondering, Mr. Speaker, they're really wondering, why is the leader of the Conservative not getting his security clearance, Mr. Speaker? What does he have to hide, Mr. Speaker? People on the street of Canada are asking, Mr. Speaker, get the clearance, get the briefing, get on and do your job, man.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
We're talking about the Canadians. They're starving and they want to make personal attacks on the Conservative leader. These economic arsonists will do anything to deflect away from their failed record. Canadian workers are $22,000 poorer than U.S. workers. If Canada had just kept pace with the U.S. over the last 2 years, Canadian workers would have $6,200 more every year. And now Canada is poorer than Alabama. Why don't these economic arsonists call a carbon tax election so Canadian workers can finally fire them?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and People with Disabilities.
Mr. Speaker, we won't take any lessons from the Conservatives on how to deliver for Canadians. While they keep their headed agenda, Mr. Speaker, we know exactly what they'll do. They'll cut dental care for 9 million Canadians. They'll end $10 a day childcare. They'll cancel the National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker. Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, won't tell you their plan because they don't want Canadians to know. Just like, Mr. Speaker, their leader won't get the security clearance that he needs to protect Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Shame on them. What are they hiding?
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, more bad news from experts. Last week, economists at National Bank released an analysis that said, quote, GDP per capita has fallen by about 4% cumulatively since 2022, which is unprecedented outside a recession. This is a made-in-Canada per person per capita GDP recession caused by a government that's hiked taxes on everything. Energy, housing, banks, investment, that's driving out investment and making Canadians poorer. When will the government admit its mistake and reverse course on tax hikes that are driving out investment, like they reversed course on so many other issues?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives would like to make comparisons with the United States, I have one for them. Canada ran a deficit of just 1.1% of GDP in 2023, Mr. Speaker. That's compared to a 6.3% of GDP deficit in the United States of America, Mr. Speaker. We have made sure to be responsible with our balance sheet, and we are doing it while supporting vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives' hidden agenda is to cut programs that Canadians rely on.
Again, just saying, like, we don't see Ben Diane very often. She is trash. Absolute awful human being. All of these liberals are fake. They want to take everything away from us. Everything. You think it's going to stop at just money? Take away our land? Oh.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Pubic
Mr. Speaker,
hair
I'll
on
quote
our
another
head.
expert relative to Canada's position with the United States. The governor of the Bank of Canada, who last week said, quote, foreign capital, even some Canadian capital, is going to the United States because they can get faster regulatory approvals, end quote. 2 years ago in Washington, the finance minister in her speech said, quote, Canada must and will show similar generosity in fast-tracking, for example, the energy and mining projects our allies need to heat their homes and to manufacture electric vehicles, end quote. Simple question. Can the government tell us which mining and energy projects they have fast-tracked since the speech in Washington?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I know that member to be an honourable.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Southwest St. Margaret's, please, to not take the floor unless recognized by the chair. The honourable member. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that member to be someone who cares about Canada's standing in the world and who I thought cared about Canada's national security as well. But what I find perplexing and what I think must be difficult for him to understand is why is it that the leader of the official opposition is refusing to get a security clearance? Why is it that he would rather ignore the threats to Canada's national security? What is it that he's trying to hide, or what is it that he doesn't want to know? The NCCOP reported that a conservative leadership campaign was under threat by foreign actors. Is that something he doesn't want to know about?
Cantankerous bitch, right? Like Karina Gould. She just lies and acts confused. Wonder why. She's not stupid either. She's just an idiot.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Canadian GDP has declined in 8 of the 9 last quarters. This means Canadians are getting poorer, their quality of life is declining dramatically, and the story is exactly the opposite in the U.S., where there's 2.8% GDP growth. Canadians are facing a recession caused by the Prime Minister's increases in carbon tax, housing tax, and capital gains tax. I know it's hard for the Prime Minister to understand the poverty of Canadians because he's never been in need himself, but can he show some compassion by eliminating his taxes? The Honourable Minister. Canadians have enjoyed record investments. Take Honda, for example, the largest investment in their history, $19 billion Honda has invested. And the largest investment in BHP's history also, $22 billion in Saskatchewan. Record investments are being made in Canadian companies. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a winner in this century's economy, and we will continue working for Canadians. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, how many jobs are Canadians losing because of the quadrupling of the carbon tax, and the job-killing capital gains tax increase as well? Where's the gain, Mr. Speaker? And what we've learned through Statistics Canada is that the income of Canadian households has declined while it's on the increase in the U.S. In Canada, people are having to pay through their teeth. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Let's talk about investment in my colleague's riding. Affordable housing units are being built as we speak and the funding for that was questioned by the Conservative leader because he wants to cut back on those deals with the provinces. Would he ask the Conservative leader, who's sitting just 4 seats over for him, if he could get his security clearance so that he can protect all Conservative members?
No big surprise a doofus like that is a one-trick pony, but how many times are they going to ask this? It's very simple. Poilievre doesn't want the information, obviously, because Trudeau can just give it to him. And why would you want to know information if you cannot do anything about it when you're a person that tries to make things better? They're so fake and woke. You know, I'm trying to roll with it today, but like these liberals, all of them, everyone sitting in one of those chairs is a loser. They're a bad human being. They want you to have a worse life. They want your children and grandchildren to have worse lives than we have now. They have sold us out. And to any of the RCMP in the room, enjoy the chat. People here don't like RCMP either. You're a waste.
Against foreign interference. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Tonight, in the presidential elections, Americans will choose who gets to reopen the North American Free Trade Deal in 2026. Our most important free trade agreement is at risk of being renegotiated. Trump has promised to do that, and Harris voted against CUSMA. That's why it's dangerous to let two senators, Peter Boehm and Peter Harder, block C-282. They want to overturn the vote of elected officials to put supply management back on the bargaining table as early as 2026. It's the Prime Minister who appointed them. Will he finally ask them to pass C-282 so it's enforced before any renegotiation? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind our Bloc colleagues that senators are independent. What he's saying is that the Bloc doesn't have the power to protect supply management. The only government, the only party, the only group of members who has the will and the desire and the ability to protect supply management is a Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. The Prime Minister knows that if C-282 isn't passed, the Americans could put supply management back on the bargaining table as early as 2026. He also knows it won't be him doing the bargaining, it'll be the Conservative leader. If he doesn't act to put C-282 ahead of any negotiation, he's putting our agriculture in the hands of the Conservatives, the same Conservatives who conceded supply management loopholes in agreements with Europe and Asia. Will the Prime Minister intervene, or has he already done so silently? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can assure you that with our Prime Minister, the Minister of International Trade, the Minister of Agriculture, and myself and many of our colleagues, we are talking to senators and we are asking them to get that bill back here quickly. But any legislation can be amended. The best way to protect farmers in Quebec and all across Canada is to ensure that we keep a Liberal government in office for a long time to come. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. The last answer to my last question was yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt the member. I would ask members, please, to allow the member who has the floor to ask his question so that everyone here, including the Speaker, can hear his question. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. From the top, please. It seems that the answer to my last question was yes, Mr. Speaker. No one in this House should tolerate two senators overturning our democratic choice to protect supply management. Message to Misters Beam and Harder. If you want to sacrifice supply management, then run for office. Face the voters for once instead of cashing checks for life in the Senate. Come and present your ideas to farmers in Berthier-Masquinongé. Come and face me. The Liberals are looking for candidates. Will the Prime Minister finally tell them to put their faces on election signs or mind their own business? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. The worst way, Mr. Speaker, to defend supply management is to align with the Conservative Party and vote along with them. They're the ones who pose the greatest risk, the greatest threat to supply management. We're the ones who stood up and defended it against the U.S. And unfortunately, what the Bloc is doing is getting in cahoots with the Conservatives.
Honourable Member from Prince George, Northern Rockies.
After 9 years and 3 U.S. presidents, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister has failed to get a deal with the Americans on softwood lumber, while our previous Conservative government got it done within 80 days. 2 more mills in BC are closing because of this Prime Minister's incompetence. Wayne and Marie Harder have seen their logging businesses in Fort St. John destroyed by these NDP Liberals. I asked Wayne yesterday, who would you fire in this NDP Liberal government? Wayne's answer, all of them. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing for forestry families and call an election today?
I'm going to ask once again the colleagues at the end, particularly the member
Shut
from
up, Fergus. Sit down
New
and shut up,
Westminster,
stupid
Burnaby, and Timmins St. James, Bay James, to please not take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say to forestry industry workers and those in the sector how important they are to Canada.
How dare this fat troll like grace our screen or you know, pollute our screen and our audio with her BS. Mary Ng is a traitor to our country, and she's standing up there like she has full rights.
How important they are to Canada's economy, and indeed how important they are to building affordable homes in this country. I know that we continue to work very hard and we have said that getting a deal is indeed the best way to go. But I think what Canadians want to know is why it is that
you're a communist.
On this side of the House, when we renegotiated NAFTA, on this side of the House, when we stood up to defend tariffs against steel and aluminum workers, or on this side of the House, we are always standing up for workers, what they are doing on the other side of the House.
The Honourable Member for Miramichi, Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost to Canada's economy. While the Prime Minister dismissed his failure on softwood lumber as a small issue, the U.S. slapped a 14.5% tariff on Canada. This negatively impacts the 24,000 New Brunswick forestry workers. The Prime Minister has failed with 3 straight U.S. presidents, while Prime Minister Harper got a deal in just 80 days. When will the Prime Minister finally stand up for New Brunswick forestry workers?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We on this side of the House have been working very hard in the interests of forestry workers and forestry companies here in Canada. We are working.
Who thinks he's going to say 8 out of 10 families get more money back? Like, let's see if he says it, because almost every time this jackass Jonathan Wilkinson, who's a dirtbag and deserves, you know, he's a traitor too. They all are. The liberal woke are cult members that are traitors to our nation, but they're in control of our nation. They hate our people. It's a weird thing. Canadians aren't dumb. They're smarter than these guys. And Jonathan Wilkinson is a waste
working
of
very
blood and
hard
skin.
to progress negotiations with the Americans. We are working very hard on value-added forestry. It is something that we are committed to continuing to do, including working with Irving Forest Products in New Brunswick. I would say, though, that on this side of the House, we are working very hard in the best interests of Canadians. We would expect elected officials across the board to be doing that, and Canadians are asking why the Leader of the Opposition will not get his security clearance.
Exactly.
The Honourable Member from Prince Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Just weeks after the U.S. hit Canada with a 14.5% tariff on softwood lumber, this Prime Minister dismissed its failures and the impact on Canadian workers and the impact of our forestry sector as small issues. Since the PM's comments in New York City, 2 sawmills in BC have closed, putting over 500 workers out of work. Canadian producers have paid $9 billion in tariffs to the U.S., from softwood lumber to Buy America. Why has this Prime Minister repeatedly backed down to the U.S.?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government always stands up for Canadian workers and it always stands up for Canadian industry. When it came to renegotiating NAFTA, we stood strong and protected Canada's economy, while the Conservative Party of Canada said to capitulate. When it came to supporting our steel and aluminum workers, we stood against those tariffs. We hit back hard. What did the other side say, Mr. Speaker? The Conservative Party of Canada said capitulate. When it comes to standing up for Canada's national security, we will always do that. But what about the Conservative Party of Canada? Mr. Speaker, their leader won't even get a security clearance to know what's really going on. What is it he's trying to hide? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do they have anything else? Do they have anything else to say today other than what they've been saying for 2 weeks, which is nothing? The worst part is, guys, people will watch them and they'll be like, oh, I'm not watching that. But you have to, because they won't care. The people that turn it off, they won't vote. That's the type of people they are.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government and 3 American presidents, we still don't have a softwood lumber agreement with the United States. While the previous Conservative Prime Minister got a solution at 90 days after being elected, the incompetence and lack of leadership from this Prime Minister means we don't have a deal. 3 sawmills have filmed recently in Quebec, including one in my riding. 100 workers have been let go. Why are the Liberals still abandoning forestry workers? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my colleague, and he knows that we've always stood up for the forestry sector and its workers. But the real question, Mr. Speaker, that Canadians are asking today, the real question they're asking is, why is the Conservative leader not getting his security clearance? Why, Mr. Speaker? What is he hiding from Canadians, Mr. Speaker? That's the real question of the day. That's the elephant in the room, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader needs to get the security clearance. He'll get the briefings then, and then he'll be able to do his work, because that's what Canadians expect from a leader. They expect them to get a security clearance.
The Honourable Member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, women veterans will be attending Remembrance Day services this week. Despite their courage and dedication, many of them will be asked if the medals they are wearing belong to their husbands or sons. Women veterans and their loved ones have sacrificed so much for our country. They cannot be made invisible. Will the minister make sure the organizers of the National Remembrance Day ceremony include women veterans, giving them the respect they deserve?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, today being the first day of Veterans Week, I first of all want to take a moment to thank all the men and women that served in the Canadian Armed Forces and continue to serve with bravery. We owe them a debt of gratitude. As we attend Remembrance Day services all through Canada, we certainly want to make sure that Canadians have a moment to really thank the veterans that have served. I also encourage them to attend Legions.
My mom just gave me a bowl haircut. Look, don't I look nice? Look at my ugly haircut. She just puts a bowl on your head and cuts around it.
And also many commemorative services that will take place all over Canada to thank both men and women that have served in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from London, Fanshawe.
For 17 years, the Office of the Veteran Ombuds has been shining a light on the neglect of veterans. We have a sacred obligation to care for those who served, but successive Liberal and Conservative governments have ignored their reports and recommendations. Veterans need action, and we need to empower the Ombuds by giving them the power.
Oh no.
Them the power to compel documents and issue binding recommendations. When will the Liberals make the necessary changes to create a truly independent ombuds so she can be the champion veterans deserve?
The Honourable Minister for Veterans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the services that we've provided to veterans across this country, since 2016, our government has invested more than $11.5 billion in additional services and support to help.
They're investing your money that could be, just in your bank account, but instead they taxed you and now they're giving it to their friends. When they say they're investing, they're not investing in your future or any of these things. They're investing in bureaucracy. And that bureaucracy is built on the backs of the liberal insiders. It's a money wash, like it's a money launder. It's all it is. They're not investing. They're stealing your tax dollars and giving it to their friends and other business connections. They're the most hateful people on the planet, man, is our liberal government, and the NDP too. They don't get away with it.
Help our veterans and their families. Unlike the previous Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, we have acted. The previous Conservative government closed Veterans Affairs offices across this country. And the first thing that we did, we reopened all 9 offices, plus we opened an additional one. They also slashed the public service by 1,000 people, Mr. Speaker, public servants that provided direct supports to veterans. We will absolutely always be there for veterans and their families, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. They'll be there for veterans, like with MAID. That's their plan. That is what they're doing, guys. Like, if you connect all the dots, like, oh, we will support veterans, here's MAID. Like, here, assisted suicide for your mental disorder that we could fix through therapy, exercise, and positive or healthy diet. But no.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Mr. Speaker, our government has an ambitious plan when it comes to housing. Fighting homelessness, making home buying more accessible with the First Home Savings Account, putting federal land on the market for housing, and supporting co-ops. Can the Minister of Economic Development for Quebec please tell us how these measures will increase access to housing around the country and increase housing stock across the country? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development for Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Housing Accelerator Fund is going to help to build thousands of social and affordable housing units. Even Conservative MPs know it, and they've written to the Housing Minister to ask to access that program.
And also, right now, like for Shanahan to get up there and ask that question in French, and it's inappropriate right now in question period to be speaking in French. I understand what they're saying. Enough, my French isn't great, but I do understand what they're saying, get the gist of it, but again, it's a woke tactic. And again, the conservative, all the parties use it. It's bullshit. We're sick of it.
In their own writings. The irresponsible plan from the Conservative leader to cut investments is going to endanger 8,000 accessible housing units in Quebec, Mr. Speaker. We can't trust a leader who's offering just cuts and slogans, but especially who isn't getting his security clearance so that he can protect Canadians from the dangers that we face.
The Honourable Member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, the majority of young Canadians have now abandoned the dream of home ownership. While housing starts fail to keep up with Canada's population growth, the Americans are building 4 times more housing per new resident. Conservatives have announced a plan to axe the federal sales tax on new homes, and we have called on the provinces to do the same. Our plan means more housing and savings for young Canadians who are desperately trying to enter the housing market. Will the NDP Liberals reignite the dream of homeownership and axe the federal GST on housing?
Here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Oh, no.
The list is growing, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we learned in the Toronto Star that the MP for Kamloops on the Conservative side has joined.
So Peter Faggots Keiko's here has this exact same mouth as Greg Fergus. If you look, he's got frog-like shape and lips, and he also started to shave when he was 3 years old. I saw somebody say that in the comments yesterday, and it was pretty funny.
Many other Conservative colleagues to advocate for programs that their leader wants to cut. Programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund that are going to lead to more home building in his community and communities across the country, Mr. Speaker. They want to make these cuts. They have no vision on housing. Therefore, they have no vision on the future for Canada, Mr. Speaker. It's not
I ask the Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou, as well as the member for Coast of Bays Central Notre Dame to please not take the floor unless they are recognized by the Speaker. I thank the Honourable Members. The honourable member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Speaker, that wannabe minister is so desperately clinging onto their $8 billion failed Liberal housing photo op program that has built zero houses. Conservatives have proposed the most significant housing policy commitment made in the past 2 decades. And those aren't my words, Mr. Speaker. That's what the West End Home Builders Association has said. And the Canadian Real Estate Association also called it a positive step towards making home ownership more attainable for Canadians. Will the NDP Liberals listen to the experts and axe the federal sales tax on housing?
Okay, so they were asked a question about housing. They're either not going to discuss housing whatsoever, or their entire answer is going to be talking about Pierre Poilievre only building 6 houses. That's not true, but that's what they're going to say. That's my guess.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
It's a difficult subject for them, Mr. Speaker, obviously. The MP for Kamloops, the MP for Simcoe North, the MP for Central Okanagan, the MP, and he's the best friend of the Conservative leader, the MP for St. Albert Edmonton, Mr. Speaker, went behind the back of the Conservative leader to advocate for the accelerator fund that's going to lead to more home building. In this House of Commons, on social media, they parrot their leader's talking points, but they don't believe in those talking points, evidently, Mr. Speaker, because they're advocating for good government programs that are going to get more homes built for Canadians.
Hey man, they're dancing with death. They don't know it, but they're dancing with death.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the 2 leaders of the Liberal Bloc Party aren't worth the cost of housing, but the common sense Conservatives will axe the GST on new home sales. For an $800,000 home, which cost only $400,000 when our leader was housing minister, that will allow buyers to save $40,000. That's $2,200 per year in mortgage payments, Mr. Speaker. When will the 2 leaders of the Liberal Bloc Party axe the federal tax on housing, or are they going to continue to fund their photo op programs? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development for Quebec. Well, I would like to share with my honourable colleague a simple mathematical rule, Mr. Speaker. It's very simple. 6 is lower than 8,000, and that's the number of homes that the Conservative leader is putting in danger. 8,000 with his cuts. He needs to answer to Quebecers. Why won't he do it? I would invite all members, including ministers and leaders of the opposition parties, to take their conversations outside of the House.
You know what I'd invite you to do, Greg Fergus?
House, please. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' failures in housing have been resounding, Mr. Speaker. The 2 leaders of the Liberal Bloc Party have doubled the cost of housing, rent, and down payments. Because the Liberals' record is such a disaster, the common sense Conservatives will cut $8 billion in failed, ineffective Liberal housing programs. Mr. Speaker, when the Conservative leader was Minister of Housing, he built 195,000 new homes. And we have the receipts. Why are the 2 leaders of the Liberal Bloc Party so far to the left that they've left Canadians behind when it comes to housing? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development for Quebec. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know how my honourable colleague can say to his constituents how they are going to cut the 80 housing units that are planned for his riding under the Housing Accelerator Fund. But his constituents also want to know why the Conservative leader doesn't want to get his security clearance and protect Canada's democratic integrity, the integrity of his own party. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville.
Isn't that rich for that fat pig to be talking about integrity of a party? Isn't that rich? Ferrata, go to hell. Trash, man. Like, I understand politics is dirty, but not at this level. I hope a liberal... man.
The Liberals promised a major reform of EI in 2015, then again in 2019. Then in 2021, and then no later than 2022 promised, and then by Christmas 2022 pinky swear. 9 years, 4 ministers later, the Liberals have done nothing. EI is still failing 6 out of 10 workers. That's why the Bloc Québécois has tabled a bill to reform EI, and it's going to fix these inequalities. Will the Liberals support it? The Honourable Minister for Economic Development. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, and when it comes to the question of modernizing the employment insurance program, that's a priority for our government, and we have made major changes, Mr. Speaker. We've extended the illness benefits to 26 weeks. We have extended the 5 weeks of additional support for seasonal workers, Mr. Speaker. We've also added important benefits for adoptive parents, and we are going to continue to modernize the EI system for all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. With C418, the Bloc is moving forward where the Liberals have failed since 2015. We are proposing a single eligibility criteria at 420 hours. Increased benefits from 55 to 60%, increasing the minimum benefit period to 35 weeks, increasing special illness benefits to 50 weeks, and the list goes on. That's what a real reform looks like. Will the Liberals support us? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Well, Mr. Speaker, there's a gang who want to support us in continuing.
Isn't that rich? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Is this biter Randy Balsano? Like, oh my God, the state of our country, guys. We need a plane crash is what we need.
To modernize the EI system. We've heard loud and clear at our summit on the labour force for the 21st century. Listen, I understand that the Bloc Québécois wants to move forward with certain ideas here in the House, but they are going to disassociate from their friends, the Conservatives, and support us so that we can get back to work, the very important work that we need to get done here in the House of Commons. That's the question of the day.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, they are not worth the cost of housing, and the majority of young Canadians are pointing to this government's failure to manage the economy as the reason their dreams of home ownership are dashed. The Conservatives have a plan. Scrapping the GST on new home sales will save young Canadians tens of thousands of dollars on new homes, and the Conservative leader already wrote the premiers asking them to match his pledge provincially. Mr. Speaker, will the NDP Liberals axe the federal GST on housing so more young Canadians can afford a home?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I've answered the matter already, and on this issue of housing, she ought to look one seat ahead of her to the MP for Peterborough. Earlier today, there was a 2-hour filibuster in the House of Commons committee responsible for housing, where we could have actually talked about housing, but we had to listen to the Conservatives filibuster for 2 hours, as I say, because they were trying to defend their colleague, who only a few days ago said that homelessness and homeless people and poverty lead to crime inevitably, Mr. Speaker. They made a natural connection between the...
See, this is some woke bullshit. He's arguing like nobody in the population agrees with what he's saying. Because homelessness does lead to crime. Like, I saw this piece of the committee that he's talking about here. Peter Fragas-Caicos is a moron. Like, this is not just dirty politics. This is straight up lying.
Blaming the poor for crime in Canada, it's unacceptable. We got to deal with stigma, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lennox, Hastings and Addington.
Let me be clear and call out the facts tax on the failures of these Liberals. The Liberals' own housing advisor said it was hard to deny that the Housing Accelerator Fund is turning out to be nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to the municipalities. In contrast, the Conservative plan will apply to every single new home build, regardless if it's in downtown Toronto or in Bancroft. The Conservative plan will take power from the pens of bureaucrats to the hammers of builders. Mr. Speaker, will this government endorse the Conservative plan to scrap the GST on housing? Yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
More empty slogans from the Conservative side, Mr. Speaker. But you know what's not empty? You know what's real? The example of the Conservative leader who only months ago went down to encampments and filled people in their most vulnerable state. Right. Who before that visited a home of a working class person, a server, and called it a shack, Mr. Speaker. Yep. So is it any surprise that the MP for Peterborough looks at poverty as something that's caused by those on the street, that points to the poor and makes them responsible for issues of criminality? We have to deal with stigma if we're going to deal with the homelessness crisis. They're not serious, Mr.
The Honourable Member from Kamloops, Thompson and Caribou.
There was chaos, yelling, screaming, running for cover. And no, Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about the last Liberal caucus meeting. I'm talking about a police chase that happened in downtown Toronto. It looked like the scene from a movie. Police chasing two people reportedly on bail. Rather than take accountability, this minister's response, do this, blame other people, blame the provinces. When will the Prime Minister and this Justice Minister stand in their place and take accountability for their failed catch and release policy?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about accountability. There are currently 700 fewer police officers working in the City of Toronto today than when I was the police chief only 9 years ago. Mr. Speaker, there's been a 23% reduction.
That's because of the mood of the nation. They can't recruit. And the mood of the nation is based on the sabotage the Liberals have inflicted upon our nation. And this old drunk Bill Blair is going to get up here and shoot off his mouth and brag about being a former commissioner of some shit department when it was run by him. Still is. I mean, Lord, these Liberals.
In
Bill
police
Blair,
per population in Toronto over those 9 years. And Mr. Speaker, how did that happen? 2 consecutive Conservative mayors, under the unwatchful eye of a Conservative premier, allowed a hiring freeze and those cuts to take place. If you want to look for accountability, look in the mirror.
Imagine being in charge for 9 years and then saying to somebody like, oh, you aren't happy with the way things are now? Look in the mirror. What the fuck, man? Like...
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, through the First and Second World Wars, over 300,000 Canadians in uniform left Halifax to go to Europe. Canada has hundreds of thousands of veterans, all of whom have their own specific experience. Every year, Veterans Week is the opportunity to reaffirm that as Canadians, we have the duty to remember the sacrifices that those who have served made, and that those who continue to serve continue to make. Can the Minister of Veterans Affairs please inform this House about the theme of Veterans Week this year? The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. I'd like to thank my colleague from Ottawa-Vanier for her important question and for her hard work for our veterans and their families. The theme of Veterans Week this year is Canadian Armed Forces Around the World. It's a theme that reflects the role that Canada has long played in promoting and defending peace and security around the world. Mr. Speaker,
Canadians across the country to either attend Legions this week to thank a veteran and also to make sure that they take part in a commemorative service in their community. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. The Honourable Member from Leeds-Grenville, Thousand Islands and Vito Lakes.
The Liberals' $9 million cover-up of their luxury condo purchase in New York City is now unraveling.
newly uncovered government documents show that the Prime Minister's media pal, Tom Clark, lied before a parliamentary committee. He had previously said that he didn't weigh in on the purchase, but now we know he in fact said that it required urgent replacement. After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, they're not worth the cost, the corruption, or lies from their insiders. So will the Prime Minister fire his buddy Tom Clark for lying to Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I just went to the OGO committee and I answered all of his questions for an hour, and we've been talking about this issue. First and foremost, we have good value for money in this transaction. $7 million will be refunded. Second, all the process were, of course, followed. And finally, we don't fall into the character assassination that he's doing about an important consul. But not only that, at the time of the U.S. election today, when all Canadians are looking down south to see what's going to happen, we need to invest in the American-Canadian relationship, and that's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Vito Lakes.
These economic vandals bought a $9 million condo in Manhattan for the Prime Minister's buddy, and they're subsidizing his rent to the tune of $40,000 per month after doubling rents for Canadians, doubling mortgages for Canadians, and presiding over a country for 9 years with homeless encampments springing up under bridges in communities from coast to coast to coast. If that's not bad enough, Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers. 25% of Canadians don't know where their next meal is coming from. If they won't fire Clark for lying, will they fire him for blowing $9 million?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Apparently, Mr. Clark was good enough for the Conservative when he was moderating their leadership race, but that's another issue. That's another issue, Mr. Speaker. What I want to say today is, as Canadians are looking down south to see what's going on and to take act of the will of the American people, we will invest in the relationship between Canada and the U.S., contrary to what the Conservatives want to do. And of course, we won't take the recommendation of having an official residence outside of Manhattan. Why? Because only 2 countries in the world do so, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from... Order. That includes the Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's. The Honourable Member from Calgary, Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, Tom Clark lied to committee, saying that he didn't know about the purchase of a $9 million condo. The Minister of Foreign Affairs also said she didn't know about the purchase of a $9 million condo. She also said she didn't know that a Canadian warship was next to Russian warships in the port of Havana. She also said that she didn't know that a senior global affairs official attended a Russian embassy party. Mr. Speaker, isn't that the role of the Minister of Foreign Affairs to know?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
I know I have a lot of time for the member opposite, because she used to be the consul in Dallas, and she knows how much it's important to be investing in her diplomatic network in the U.S. So of course, we'll continue to do so. We'll continue to invest across our continent, across also the U.S., because if there's one country in the world who knows about the Americans, who knows about the U.S., it's Canada.
Good job, now.
The Honourable Member from Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, previous Conservative government has brought cuts and challenges that left many veterans struggling, particularly in British Columbia, and we don't want to see this happen again. Our Liberal government has worked diligently to address these issues. As we reflect on these changes, let us remember that our commitment to veterans must be unwavering. Can the Minister of Citizen Services share how our government has expanded our reach to better support veterans from coast to coast to coast?
The Honourable Minister from Citizen Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you remember when the Conservatives campaigned on shutting down veterans' offices? Yep. Or do you remember when they promised to increase the retirement age to 67? Well, of course you don't, because Conservatives never actually say what they're actually going to do. It's why they speak in slogans. They hope no one would notice that they shut down veterans' offices in Corner Brook, Sydney, Charlottetown, Thunder Bay, Windsor, Saskatoon, Brandon, Kelowna, and Prince George. Mr. Speaker, our government reopened all those offices, and we opened a new office in Surrey, because when we say that we support veterans, unlike Conservatives, we actually mean it.
The honourable member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, Windsor is being abused and taken for granted by the Liberals yet again. It's a sad state that the city must sue the federal government to recoup the cost of the Ambassador Bridge.
And again, guys, it's just my opinion. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you that I'm thinking. Brian Massey is a sellout. Every single one of the NDP MPs is just as bad as Jagmeet. They're all sellouts. If you follow the leader, you're as bad as the leader. If you don't agree with what the leader's doing, go your own direction, be a real person. But no, Brian Massey is a coward, and he's just waiting for his big pension payday. Sellouts, all of the NDP. Never forget it. Like, it's not just Jagmeet. The rest of them are sheep that are following that shepherd. And, well, sorry to say that about shepherds. Don't mean to minimize their role, following that loser Singh, and yeah.
Blockade. While the Conservatives supported this illegal activity that hurt the economy and public safety, the Liberals are making Windsor taxpayers foot the bill. This means less money for roads, parks, housing, and emergency services. Less services for Windsor because of Liberal failures. Instead of forcing Windsor to fight in court, will this government repay the city and finally take responsibility for federal border costs as they should?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our colleague from Windsor for that important question. He's right. At a time when the Conservatives were supporting the illegal acts of the convoy, the City of Windsor and the Province of Ontario were partners with the Government of Canada in trying to bring this horrible crisis to a peaceful conclusion. I was happy some months ago to have an opportunity to talk to the Mayor of Windsor. My colleagues on this side of the House have also been talking to me about what we can do to support the City of Windsor. And Mr. Speaker, we're always open to working with the City of Windsor. They've been a valuable partner to our government.
The honourable member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, INEO Employment in Port Alberni provides vital support to help people trying to find jobs. They offer necessary training and capacity building for employment readiness. They can do this because of the BC Community and Employer Partnerships Program, but they've recently
have another
lost
donut,
Gord
Due to
federal funding cuts that are happening because the Liberal slashed BC's funding by $74 million. They're leaving people out to dry, but while they do everything they can to continue to prop up rich CEOs, will the Liberals immediately restore BC's federal funding to make sure that these critical programs keep running?
Here, here.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
I'm happy to report to this House that the Government of Canada transfers $2.8 billion every year to train almost 1 million workers in partnerships that we have with British Columbia, provinces and territories across the country. If that member and other members in this House want to make sure that we have a fully functioning workforce, let's get the provinces to do their part when it comes to recognizing foreign credentials. We have thousands of people in this country who need to make sure that the credentials are recognized here. We need the provinces to do their
Randy's jerking himself off with his left hand. I don't know if you can see. He doesn't have to move his hand much.
part and make sure that people don't have survival jobs in this country, but they have dignified jobs from coast to coast to coast.
It being 3:19, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion.
Yeah, gang, so that wraps up question period for today. It is so frustrating because they just continue to lie. I'm sorry, yesterday it really got to me, but it's not going to go away. And as far as it goes, I can stop doing this show and alleviate the frustration of having to watch these guys lie, but that's not it. We need to continue to watch. We need to show people what is happening in context because, for example, my mom only watches the CBC clips. And she thinks everything is fine, despite knowing in the back of her mind that everything is so expensive that we can't afford anything at the grocery store. Like, I don't live with my mom, I'm just saying that, oh, it's whacked. Like, anyhow, gang, thank you all for tuning in. We're trying to have some fun. Like, it is so frustrating. I know to the people that hang out here every day, you guys are in tune, you know what's going on, but to the people that don't watch, they don't know, I don't think, like how bad it really is until you see it. So we'll continue to show it because it's important for people to see, and it's the only way the word's really going to get out. Because like, maybe once in a while Global will break a story, but CBC and CTV are useless. They're paid for propaganda machines for the Liberal NDP coalition and the WEF and all of that, and all of the pigs that are in the room. If there's RCMP in the room, here, I got something for you. That's it. Yeah, antagonize them. Bring it on, pigs. Anyhow, Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Have a great afternoon, great evening. We're going to head out, and this is how we're doing that. Take care, gang. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Oh, yeah. It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The worst that works.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.